the four-wheel drive of the Suzuki allows total superior traction in adverse conditions, and in general is not needed for normal road use, with the exception of ice and snow, giving all year round total mobility. It is therefore not necessary to select four-wheel drive for ordinary road use, as it could lead to a decrease in the vehicle's fuel consumption, excessive tyre wear and mechanical stress. What is four-wheel drive? In normal two-wheel drive, the drive path, shown in yellow, is from the engine to the gearbox and transfer box, through the prop shaft to the rear axle. The vehicle is thereby driven by the two rear wheels only. When four-wheel drive is selected, the transfer box engages the front prop shaft, shown in red, allowing the front axle to be driven. The vehicle is now in four-wheel drive, with the power chain being taken from the engine through the gearbox and transfer box to both front and rear axles. Freewheel front hubs can be fitted to the front two wheels of the vehicle. In normal circumstances, when the Suzuki is in two-wheel drive, the front axle chain is still being driven through the forward motion of the front wheels. That is to say that as the front wheels rotate freely, they are still connected through the axle and front differential to the front prop shaft. Freewheel front hubs allow the front wheels to be rotated without connection to the axle. This, therefore, saves on power being used in driving the front drive chain from the front road wheels, and therefore reduces front axle noise, lightens the steering, and gives savings on fuel, tires, and mechanical wear. At this point, it's worth remembering that the freewheel front hubs, if fitted, must be engaged before any serious off-road driving is to be carried out. When do you use four-wheel drive? In general, four-wheel drive is only required when driving in adverse conditions, such as mud, snow, chalk, deep water, or any conditions where extra traction is required. And in most circumstances, the four-wheel drive high ratio position will prove to be totally adequate. Until complete familiarity is gained with the vehicle, it's recommended that the change from two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive is carried out whilst the vehicle is stationary. Once the experience of driving the Suzuki has built enough confidence, then the change can be made on the move. But it must be emphasized that this must be carried out with the front wheels in a straight line and parallel to the body, or serious damage can occur. The four-wheel drive low ratio position need only be used in extreme conditions of poor traction and on steep slopes, and must only be selected when the vehicle is stationary. Selecting low ratio reduces the top speed of the vehicle considerably. Before moving off, the conditions to be driven in should be checked, and then the correct drive ratio can be selected. Ability to select the correct ratio can only come with the experience of driving off-road. Suzukis are fitted with a very efficient transmission brake, which is operated by the handbrake lever. This type of brake ensures good braking on steep gradients, and under no circumstances should it be applied when the vehicle is on the move, as this could cause severe mechanical damage. Before any serious off-road driving is to be carried out, it's worth considering the following simple rules for your safety and convenience. Whenever possible, go with two vehicles, so you can assist each other in case of emergency. Take the following: a good strong nylon rope, approximately 2 vehicle lengths long, a recovery spade in good condition, a strong waterproof torch, some dry sacking. Make sure these are well secured in the vehicle and cannot be thrown around inside. If really rough terrain or competition is being considered, then a crash helmet and full harness should always be considered. Rolling the vehicle on its side can happen, even with the most proficient drivers. Don't forget, someone usually owns the land you wish to use, so always seek permission. On straight but rutted and rocky tracks, in fact under all off-road conditions, it's very usual for the steering wheel to kick in one direction or the other. So driving position is very important. Adjust your seating position so that all pedals and controls come within easy reach. Check the position of your hands on the steering wheel. Remember that the steering wheel is going to tend to kick, and thumbs become vulnerable. So try to keep your thumbs away from the inside of the wheel, which must be held firmly but not tightly. Fighting the steering wheel can be both tiring and dangerous. Most important of all is to check the adjustment of your seat belt. During off-road activity, this becomes more than just a safety belt. It prevents the driver from being bumped about too much when crossing very bumpy terrain, as well as its usual function of keeping you secured to your seat should you stop suddenly or roll over. Again, if serious off-roading is being considered, then a full safety harness should be fitted. The use of your control pedals is also different to the usual attitude. Be sure to keep your feet off the clutch pedal at all times, except of course when wanting to change gear. Riding the clutch pedal can mean declutching when going over rough ground due to the bumping around, causing loss of power and control. The same applies to the brake pedal. Use this as little as possible, as braking on wet and muddy terrain can induce sliding and again loss of control. Caution and observation are the key words when attempting any climb or descent. Until you have gained considerable experience, do not attempt any incline until you have checked the terrain first by walking it. This enables you to get a feel for the land and check for any boulders or unseen potholes. Although your Suzuki has a very good ground clearance, it cannot obtain good traction if the chassis or axles have bottomed on either a boulder or log. Once the terrain has been well checked and you've made sure that your driving position is comfortable and your seat belt correctly adjusted and secure, you are ready for your attempt at the gradient. Before you start off, however, remember it's always better to attack your quarry in a straight line. Trying to cross any gradient at an angle before expertise has been gained can be extremely dangerous. So you've checked everything. Now position the vehicle a sufficient distance from the slope to allow a build-up of speed. That is not to say high speed, but enough momentum to assist the vehicle up the slope. With practice, you will soon be able to judge the correct speed to approach any gradient you come across. Charging full speed up the gradient is also bad practice. When you get to the other side, you may very well have a very unpleasant surprise awaiting you. If by any chance you should not make it to the top of the gradient through lack of speed or traction, then stop. Apply the handbrake, select reverse, put the transfer box into low ratio, and back down the slope in a straight line, making sure that the front wheels are kept straight, slowly letting the engine power do the braking for you. Do not make any sudden braking, as it's very important to keep the wheels turning. Coming down a gradient is just as difficult a maneuver as going up. In fact, sometimes control can be more difficult. Again, on first attempts, the downward slope should be checked at the same time as the upward slope. Again, looking out for potholes, boulders and logs, etc. Never let the vehicle freewheel down a slope. Select low ratio and gently descend, letting the engine do most of the braking. Remember, the four-wheel drive can only give braking and traction when the clutch is fully engaged. Use of the foot brake and clutch should be avoided if at all possible, as loss of traction and braking on loose or slippery surfaces could cause the vehicle to skid or veer to one side, thereby putting the vehicle in an unstable position. However, once you've succeeded, we guarantee you'll want to do it again. Sand and water. Whenever sand or other soft terrain is to be approached, it's advisable to lower the tyre pressure slightly. This will spread the contact of the tyre surface and therefore cover more surface area, giving a lower ground pressure, which will produce better traction and will decrease the tendency to sink in the soft ground. When the soft terrain driving has been completed, the tyre pressures should be taken back to standard. Although the Suzuki electrics and air intakes are positioned high up under the bonnet and are very well waterproofed, the engine is not designed to run immersed in water. However, it will drive easily through water up to a depth level with the bottom of the doors. Water should always be approached with great caution, as one can never tell the total depth or whether there are any obstacles hidden under the surface. Common sense in measuring the depth of the water with a suitable yardstick or branch from a nearby tree is always good practice. Once the depth has been gauged, the water can be approached slowly and with caution. The driver should keep checking the depth of the water at the front wheels as he drives in, being prepared to reverse and take an alternative course if necessary. When leaving any water, it is imperative that the brakes be checked immediately and their effectiveness assessed. The quickest and most efficient way to dry them out is to apply slight pressure whilst driving around, and until they are totally dry, extra caution should be exercised. Driving fast through water may look very spectacular, but tends to force the water into places in the engine which could cause ignition problems, and therefore should be avoided. In muddy conditions, your Suzuki really comes into its own because of its superb power-to-weight ratio. When driving through deep mud, select four-wheel drive low ratio. Drive in a direct and straight line, avoiding any ruts and obstacles seen on the surface. But remember, any severe alteration in the angle of the front wheels adds drag, and therefore more energy is required to drive the vehicle on. On leaving muddy terrain, brakes and lights should be checked. If the vehicle has been driven in deep mud for a long time, then the vehicle should be washed down as soon as possible, clearing the brakes, prop shafts and under the wings of any mud which may be stuck to them, as this could affect the efficiency of the vehicle. Driving in a gully can be the most deceiving and potentially dangerous of any of the off-road conditions. Many obstacles are faced when driving up or down a gully. The side walls of the V of the gully can vary in extremes, and the wheels can be snatched by the rutted soft terrain or by any boulders. Any of these objects, rocks, soft earth washout, tree roots and loose shingle, can cause the vehicle to be trapped on the gully wall or even rolled over. With all off-road driving, caution and observation must be your keynotes for safety and enjoyment. Even when you feel you have gained experience, don't attempt to drive too fast. There is safety and more control in taking it steady. But please remember to try and go in 2 or more vehicles and take the items suggested earlier in the program. There is safety in numbers, and it saves the embarrassment of having to ask the local farmer for assistance if you're in trouble. If you follow the basic techniques covered within this program, many hours of pleasure for yourself and family will be yours for the asking. Suzuki, total mobility, enabling you to get to places that other people could only envy.